Oh, that is very, very insightful, I believe, right? And I think you're starting from a point of view that behind any of this either is a mind.
Mm.
And for you to understand that mind is very, very important. Um, do you believe that this mind changes as you age, or it sort of remains fixated around a particular pattern, right? For example, if I was 18-year-old and my testosterone is peaking and I'm wanting to show off my abs and everything else to the opposite sex or whatever,
Hmm.
I might be a goal based eater, right? And then when I turn 30 and like those this primitive or primal objectives have been met and I've moved on to phase number 2, which is tending to a family, I might be a little bit more, hey, let me go hang out with that friend of mine, from high school or college. And when I hang out with that guy, we forgive me for my language, we plunder food, right?
Hmm.
So what happens, is that what you're talking about, that the mind behind that eating is far more important?
Yeah. I think this is a question for every listener, right? Are you still eating the same way that you ate 10 years ago? Or has that changed? Right? And are you still thinking about food the same way that you did 10 years ago? Or has that changed? Right? And for some people, it might be the same. But I do believe there is a bit of a developmental evolution that happens, right? One of the key tenets of adult developmental psychology is that your mindset doesn't just stop growing when you turn 18 or 21, right? Like it continues to evolve as an adult. The difference is, right, you need to put in the work to evolve it. You need to educate yourself and you need to do some work to make sure that you're constantly growing. And a lot of times that people don't do that, and again, to no fault of their own, we don't live in a society that supports that kind of work, and it requires resources and time and education. So I want to be clear that like this is not a knock on anyone, but I do think there is evolution to it. And you can look at it also within a lifetime, right? I think we're all born with that sort of instinctual convenience eater. It's like, give me food, right? As a baby, we cry, we need nutrients, we need energy. Then we start to evolve that pleasure eater that has food preferences, right? I have a little toddler at home, and he's very good about saying, "No, I don't want that thing," or "Yes, I do want this thing," right? So, like, his pleasure eater is emerging, and then we have a social eater that obviously kind of co-emerges with that, right? Within our family unit, we're taught about what is the appropriate eating look like, right? Is it appropriate to go back and take second helpings and more portions? Is it appropriate to finish your meal before the person next to you, right? Like, does a meal look like a starch and a meat, or does a meal just look like a bunch of veggies, right? So like we learn these implicit social norms around what is a meal and what is eating, as we're growing up. And then, as you said, then as you hit this age where maybe physique is more important, right? So the goal-based eater, I find there's usually three goals that most people have, right? There's a physical goal. I want to look better, right? Which is usually tied up in sort of weight loss or body composition. There's a performance goal. I want to perform better, especially maybe you're training for a run, and right, you want to fuel your exercise, or maybe you're an athlete, right? So you're eating through this lens of how can this help me perform better at my sport. Or if you're just a busy executive, you want to perform well, right? You want to show up to the meeting, you want to have that energy, you want to have that focus, right? You need to think about how that food is going to impact your brain. So that's another focus of the goal-based eater. And so I think, then, this environmental one is something that kind of evolves last, generally, when we can begin to move beyond some of the little bit more selfish, egotistical thinking and begin to see, hey, hold on a second, we're all connected here, we're all living on this same planet. And if there's no more healthy soil, if there's no more farms, there's going to be no more food for anyone.
No, I can absolutely correlate to what you just described in all of this, right? So, Jeff, that's the last segment you talked about. Just pretty intriguing, right? So help me here. So I'm a super competitive guy. I live in Atlanta, and I do have to go to Dallas or New York or Chicago for that meeting, right? So as much planning as I want to do, or whatever patterns I want to put together for success around nutrition, they are going to fail. And you talked about the mental aspect of it, right? So what describes men, right? Why, what can I do to, when I catch that plane to Chicago or whatever, I I stay within a system or a framework?
Hmm. Yeah, people, I think you're really highlighting the important piece, which is really acting with the end in mind, which is something that's very difficult for humans to do. Our minds aren't built this way to really have this long-term vision. So we need to actually constantly come back and revisit and remind ourselves and recommit to what actually is important to us, right? Because you don't want to just eat well. You actually want energy, right? To achieve success at work, to connect deeply with your family, to show up and crush it on the squash court, right? To pursue all your passions, right? That's what you want. But yet, when you're hungry at 8 a.m. and you just need to eat something, you're not really thinking about all of those things, right? You're just thinking about what's convenient. Let me just put something in my belly so this hunger goes away, right? So we need to really first have a clear vision. What is it that we value? What is it that we're ultimately living for? And then we need to reverse engineer that into like, okay, how can that inform how we're eating, how we're sleeping, how we're taking care of ourselves, right? And it's really hard, especially as men, right? When you're burned out, when you're stressed, right? You're not fully present with the people that you care about. It affects your work. And I think a lot of guys don't really connect the dots between, say, how they're eating and how that maybe impacts their energy or their brain fog or their mood. Right? There's so many important connections, obviously, between food and mental health, and between how we take care of our body and our mood and our confidence, right? And all of these things are in service of, right, deepening connections, right, showing up as the men, the fathers, the leaders that we aspire to be. And for men, this is really hard. As we were talking about before, I think, a lot of men, are constantly sort of on the edge. They like being challenged. And the scorecard is fortune and fame and freedom, right? And this is an exciting life to live. Yet I think a lot of guys have a hard time telling the difference between being, fully alive and this mixture of adrenaline, caffeine, sugar, pressure, addiction, competition, right? And the hard thing is a lot of that is driven, all right, deep down by this fear and insecurity. And this shows up again and again, and that ultimately leads guys to these really extreme behaviors where they're not taking care of themselves often, and then until it's too late. As you were citing some of the facts around disease, heart disease, cancer, blood pressure, diabetes. I mean, you name it. And, these lifestyle diseases are the things that are, really just taking men out way sooner than they should be. And that is really, it's sad and it's a shame. And it's something that we have the ability to change. But it begins with starting upstream, again, shifting your mindset, your identity, really getting clear on what your values are, and then aligning yourself, right? Acting with integrity to practice that.
Yeah. So I think, that you've been re-emphasizing that word, going upstream and trying to investigate yourself, right? I mean, like we were talking, so 24.2% of male, they die of their mortality is because of heart attacks, right? And the second after that is cancer, right? I mean, we would imagine that metabolic diseases would be number one. I mean, and yes, I would argue that heart attacks are also metabolic diseases, but I guess there is that lurking suspicion about mental health and how we men think about our mental health, right? So what are the important learnings in mental health which you have come across for males of typically our age?
Yeah. Uh, the first is a radical self honesty, right? Really being honest with yourself about what you are, not doing in terms of taking care of yourself, right? Like if you're not sleeping, right? If you're not eating well, right? If right, whatever it is, those behaviors, right? Like I think deep down we all know, right? Like when you're drinking too much, you know it, right? When you're not exercising, right? Even if you have, right, like you might, a lot of guys, you got a gym in the building or whatever it is, right? It's like, but you're not doing it, right? So you know those places where you're out of alignment, but you need to be really honest with yourself. And then you need to seek some support. And this piece is really hard for a lot of men because we're trained with this belief that I can do it on my own, right? Because doing it on my own shows that I'm a rugged, independent, strong guy, right? And I don't need somebody else to help me out. I can figure it out. And we're also really good at enduring a lot of pain, right? I think this is a part of the male psyche of like, you know what, I'm just going to grin, I'm going to push through it, right? Even if I'm in pain, right? Now, pain again is a signal from our bodies that something is out of balance, there's something wrong, right? But if our body hurts, right, our digestion is messed up, right, or we're having some, like breathing issues, right, whatever it is, so many guys will just live with that for months and years and never do anything about it because they found a way just to push through it, or they minimize it and say, you know what, it's not that big of a deal, I can get through it, right? Or they find these coping mechanisms, right? I'm gonna drink, or I'm gonna gamble, or or whatever it is to try to find a way to escape that pain, and it just perpetuates this cycle of disease and ill health. So this goes back to really, helping break some of these masks of masculinity that prevent men from reaching out and saying, hey, you know what, like there's something that there is not working here, and I need some help to figure out how to do it better. And I always say is like, I work with so many smart, intelligent men, and I'm sure everybody here listening to this podcast is one of them, right? But I'm like, if you, right, could figure out how to do this on your own, you would have already done it by now, right? And if it's still a problem for you, right, and this problem has been going on for months and years, right, it's not that you're just going to wake up tomorrow and magically somehow that problem's going to go away, or you're going to have somehow the willpower or something to fix it. No, it's like you need something fundamental, and that needs to come from the outside. An object in motion will stay in motion. This is the most fundamental physical principle. You're on a
Obviously.
path. We're all on a path. You're going to keep staying on that path until an outside force causes you to change directions. So if you get really honest and you see that your path is taking you down this route of disease and ill health, all right, then you can't just wait for some sort of magical thing to put you on a new path. You need to go out and ask for help, find a coach, find supports, get the resources you need, talk about your issues. That doesn't make you any less of a man. And I think that piece is really, really critical, right? That it's like you can be vulnerable and still be an incredibly strong, mature, gracious, courageous, compassionate man, right? And this is like of all of, is a new template going back what we're talking about. We need a new template of manhood that really evolves us beyond some of the ones that we've inherited from previous generations.
Yeah, and I mean, just to summarize your thought, I think these are the challenges we men face these days, right? We are super competitive. We live in a lot of denial. We develop our own coping mechanisms. We like that the camel in the tent, right? Thinking that there's no sandstorm out there, right? So that coping mechanism is that piece. We 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 do a lot of endurance type thinking things, sorry. And we think of it like, this is part of my job description. And then I think these are what we kind of suffer from on a daily basis, right? And that, would you call that as a as a surfacial thing for mental health, or is that something else?
I think what you're describing is often what I refer to as like man box mindsets, right? We put ourselves in these boxes, um, right, that are familiar, they're comfortable, they're safe, right? At the most fundamental biological and emotional level, we all just want to be safe. And a lot of these habits, right, of like eating too much, drinking too much, right, maybe having an over sedentary lifestyle, right? These sort of things, like they keep us safe, and yet in a long-term perspective, right, they're actually undermining our health and our happiness. All right? And that's where it's hard because we have these competing desires. We have these competing parts within ourselves. One part wants to be safe and comfortable right now, and another part wants to feel alive and energized 10 years from now. And these two parts, all right, totally want different things at different times, right? So it's like, how do we get them in conversation with each other, right? So this shift from control to collaboration is an important one that I work on with a lot of men, right? Again, a part of, I think, the mindset that a lot of men grow up with, right, and that we're taught socially, right, is sort of mind over matter. This is the modernist paradigm, right? It's like, well, I can think my way through it. I can mentally solve it, push my way through it. If I just have the mental fortitude, I can get my body to do whatever the hell I want it to do, right? And in the short term, yes, that's true, right? And there are situations where that, extra bit of mental grit is really important. Yet, right, when that's the only way we relate to our bodies is through that domination, right, then it makes sense that our bodies are going to rebel, right? Because they've always been this sort of victimized by our mind that says, go here, do this, all right? And like, think about all the things that you eat, all the crap that you forced your body to digest over all these years, right? And your body had no say in it, right? It's not very happy. So we need to start collaborating with our bodies. Like, we're on the same team. Fundamentally, our consciousness is so intertwined with our body and physiology. We need to think of these things as one. And when we flip that mindset, right, we're not some separate minds drifting around controlling a body, right? We are body emerging as mind at the same time. And it's that change that then puts us in a different relationship, where we then have a different sense of responsibility to what does it mean to take care of ourselves. It's not just checking off a box, right? It's actually showing up physically, mentally, emotionally aligned as the type of person you want to be on this planet.